There's a lot you can discuss when it comes to Pokémon Legends ZA, especially one detail I've seen such little mention of. Don't get me wrong, from real-time battle mechanics to insane trainer customization to lackluster windows, there are tons of talking points to go around. But I personally have enjoyed the base game, and I've loved many of the little features hidden across Lumiose City. My favorites of which reference back to the games that introduced the Kalos region, Pokémon X and Y. Whether these are recreations of what was found in the original games, or NPCs mentioning diegetic changes to Lumiose since then, it brings back nostalgic memories of when the first 3D Pokemon games released just over 12 years ago. Oh my god, that made me feel old. But the X and Y nod that stood out to me the most doesn't hit until the credits roll. So I ask you, do you remember the time a song played during the credits of a Pokemon game? No, I am not talking about Ed Sheeran.
If I wasn't a musician, I'd be a virgin.
I'm talking about Kiseki, the credits theme from X and Y. And lo and behold, when the credits roll in ZA, a remix of this tune plays. And it's super symbolic. Not just about ZA being a direct sequel, but to X and Y's overall themes and the essence of the Pokemon series on a global scale. That's the Bunnelby hole we're going down today. So let's break down X and Y's forgotten theme hidden inside of Legend ZA, Kiseki. Okay, cool, but what even is it? What is Kiseki? Why does it matter? What does it mean? Well, Kiseki is the Japanese word for miracle. Fitting, of course, since Pokemon is from Japan. I think we often forget that these games are planned, developed, and written in Japanese, especially with how global of a franchise Pokemon is. Speaking of written, Kiseki is also strangely presented in X and Y. The lyrics are displayed on the 3DS's bottom screen with no vocals sung. But wait, why are there two sets of lyrics here? Yeah, this is English, but French? That's interesting. Obviously, Kalos is heavily based on France, so that makes sense. But if you play the game in French, the second language is Japanese? Okay then, the language of origin. Checks out, copy that. But what is it if you play in Japanese? French again. And more odd still, the ending refrain of the song is presented in all 7 languages X and Y were released in. English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Japanese, and Korean. If you haven't caught on yet, I'm about to gush about all of this, and we haven't even broken down the lyrics yet. We should do that first, kind of important, but let's just spark notes this thing. Kiseki emphasizes how amazing it is that you and I are alive at the same time. It's all down to sheer luck that we're here, but we're lucky to be able to share it. We shouldn't be selfish with the world we inhabit, and instead, by caring for each other more, we can make the world better. With a metaphor of a bud blooming into a flower, there's the idea that people working together to share what they love can help make people's dreams come true. There's a direct overlapping spot, a specific point where we can become one. And this idyllic future we perceive can exist. It's a world of peace, of freedom, and of dreams. Here, we've somehow managed to meet. What a gift that is for us to share. Who knew Pikachu was so wax poetic? I, for one, remember beating X and Y for the first time and being enamored by this song. Every philosophical part of this theme felt so deliberate and calculated. And yeah, it turns out, of course, it was completely intentional. Kiseki was composed by Shota Kageyama and penned by Kenji Matsushima and Junichi Masuda. That last name, if you're a diehard Pokemon fan, should ring a bell. Junichi Masuda was one of the first core team members at the studio behind Pokemon, Game Freak. He's credited as not just a developer, but also as the sole contributor to Red and Blue's music and sound effects. So every time you hum a Kanto theme, every time you pick up an item and you hear, that's because of Masuda. He made the way Pokemon sounds to us. But as the series grew, so did Masuda's role in the company. Gold and Silver, he's credited with music, game design, and sub-director. Crystal, Ruby and Sapphire, Fire Red and Leaf Green, music composition, game design, and director. Diamond and Pearl, director, music, plot. If he didn't direct a title, he was a producer. If he was a director, he still wrote music and plot. Masuda's last successive work as director was with X and Y, and afterward, he still served as a producer and composer on many more titles. The regions we love to explore across Pokemon's earlier titles exist thanks to Masuda's work on them. He had plenty of creative direction and say on many of the games that we remember as the best in the franchise. Without him, Pokemon wouldn't exist in the form it does today. But back to X and Y. Masuda had a distinct theme he wanted these games to share. And that's a message about the beauty that comes from life's chance encounters and finding common ground despite our differences. Think about all the random encounters in Pokemon games, from running through tall grass or exploring dark caves. You never exactly know what Pokemon you're going to run into, what species it will be, what gender, possibly shiny even. But eventually you will run into one who will join your team and journey alongside you all the way to the battle to become champion. Compare that thought to the real world. All of us were born into such different environments and circumstances. The year and place we were born, where we call home, who our parents are, the schools we went to, the friends we made. Through all of that, our lives have gone down distinctly separate paths. But those chance encounters, just like finding wild Pokemon, may have hopefully changed your life for the better. And sometimes the overlap may happen only once. You meet someone, maybe you help them out with directions or pick up something they dropped. It's in those crossovers where some sort of human-to-human commonality is found. And here, Masuda dares to ask, why don't we try to create a better world? Find that point where we can all meet. Kiseki is definitely calling attention to both the real world and the fictional world of Pokemon's beautiful chance moments. Or as some might say, miracles. On top of that, the letters X and Y were specifically chosen for the game's title because they represent this message. Imagine a graph where the horizontal X-axis meets the vertical Y-axis. This intersection of two lines going in different directions represents the moment of a chance encounter happening. Even if we don't speak the same tongue or eat the same food, we can have an X and Y intersecting point. ZA actually directly references Masuda's philosophy here. During one of the Team MZ meetings, your rival recalls hearing about the X and Y long ago. Something about how the X and Y axes go in different directions, but there's still a point where they meet, and finding it is the important thing. The game discusses further, noting that despite people and Pokemon's differences, we can focus on what we share. Or it's like how their little team even came to be in the first place. One day while riding the train, the idea to put this message to music came to Masuda. Why not do it? He thought the message would be presented more powerfully this way. In addition, Masuda wanted this message to be conveyed in every game's language, which at the time would not be an easy task. If you didn't know, Pokemon X and Y were the first Pokemon games to ever be published worldwide at the same time and in multiple languages. Before this point, games used to have a huge gap in their international releases, with the native Japanese release coming out way before any other language. Are you German and wanted to play Pokemon Platinum ASAP?
Viel Glück, Junge!
The Japanese copies were released 8 months ago. Some of my earliest memories on the internet involve seeing Pokemon fan sites reporting on the magazine leaks that would reveal the, at the time, new Generation 5 Pokemon. Like, 11-year-old me should not have been able to look at the Unova starters and know them by their Japanese names. Sataja, Pokabu, and Mijumaru. But if you were dedicated enough, you could have imported a Japanese copy of the games, or watched gameplay online that spoiled everything months before you could ever get your hands on it. So why was this the case? A mix of planning issues, text sizes, and translation troubles. Pokemon games have lots of text, and lots of A-button mashing for those who want to act like they're illiterate. After the original Japanese text was finalized, the next language it would be translated into was English. Believe it or not, one single freelance translator was responsible for the English translations up through Platinum. He got the job for Red and Blue after seeing a translator ad in the paper and applied on a whim. His name was...
I got stopped by a hiker! What's his name? Knob
Agasawara, whose translation work was so pivotal, the localization teams gave his name to numerous NPCs across earlier titles. I need to make a clear distinction here. Translation is taking text from one language and directly converting it to another, while localization involves more moving pieces. Not only is there translation involved, but text is often adapted to fit a target demographics cultural familiarities. Some simple examples of this can be seen with Pokemon types. We might know them in English as fire and dark type Pokemon, but the Japanese terms are Hono and Aku, meaning flame and evil, which I just can't imagine us calling them flame Pokemon or evil Pokemon. In English, it doesn't sound as good. Another example is the save button. Yeah, I know, riveting stuff here. But in Japanese, it's called the report button. If you've ever wondered why some games involve a journal, the player character is literally writing a report on their progress. This also applies to moves, a very interesting one being Payday. Its Japanese name literally means coin for a cat, which is a Japanese idiom that means to give something valuable to someone who doesn't understand what it's worth. Very fitting for Meowth and its Maneki Neko inspiration. These lucky cat statues often have an old golden Japanese coin with them, all of which is something I highly doubt many English-speaking countries would have been overly familiar with back in the 90s. A simple slang term for getting your paycheck though? Now you're talking. All of this to say, Nob was the translator while a different team at Nintendo of America worked on localization. Nob would suggest things to the team outside of direct translations, but never had full final say. Sometimes stuff would make it through, such as the names for Hoppip and Starly that he came up with. But anything that would have been in all capital letters would have had final approval by the localization team. For instance, the Game Boy character limit led to strange looking names, like the awkward spelling of alligator, or the squished together Rage Candy Bar. Some moves were changed, but not for the better, such as Hop becoming Splash. Nob was vocal against this change. However, the localization team said otherwise, which later on became really awkward when more Pokemon than just Magikarp could use the move. Numerous times, jokes would be censored that could be deemed inappropriate. The nugget item is called Kinotama in Japanese, meaning a golden ball. I feel like I don't need to explain this gag, or jokes would be lost in translation. One that Nob managed to keep though was the Old Gateau. You find this item in the Sinnoh games at the Old Chateau, which is a cute pun in English. In Japanese, the item is the Mori no Yokan, or Forest Yokan. Instead of being a cake, it was originally a yokan. These are a type of Japanese sweet treat that often comes shaped like a block, which I literally did not know existed until I started researching this video. And instead of Old Chateau, it's called the Mori no Yokan, or Forest Manor. Yes, both the item and location in Japanese are pronounced the same way, a pun that made it across the language barrier just by changing an unfamiliar sweet to a recognizable dessert. If these minute details in the job weren't stressful enough, Nob has also mentioned how Game Freak would often send text files late. Translation came across as if it were an afterthought, which is not ideal when more and more text needed to be dubbed as the series progressed. Again, Masuda wanted this theme found in the lyrics of Kiseki to resonate easily in all languages. This process simply could not work in the way it was currently running. And the examples I gave are just Japanese to English. There are more languages out there. Once the English localization was complete, the games would then be localized from their English version into French, German, etc. The Japanese to English to final language pipeline had its own issues. First off, naming. Depending on the language, Pokemon would have different names. For instance, let's take Masuda's favorite Pokemon, Psyduck. It's a simple portmanteau of Psychic and Duck. Checks out with Psyduck's headaches creating its psychic powers. In Japanese, its name is Kodaku. Ko is Japanese for small or child, and then add the English duck. Again, it makes sense for a little duck. The French name is kind of amazing, Psychoquack. It combines the French words for psychic and quack. Perfection, just perfection. And then German is, okay, it's called Enton. Enta is duck in German. Mind-blowing, I know. More strange is Spanish, where it's Psyduck. And in Italian, also Psyduck. Huh. Why are Spanish and Italian the same as English? As it turns out, every Pokemon's name in Spanish and Italian is the exact same as its English name. What could have led to this? The best theory I discovered suggested that when Nintendo of Europe was localizing Red and Blue, they originally only planned on releasing the game in English, French, and German. It was only later on that Spanish and Italian would join the release slate, but by that point, so much crunch needed to be done to get the Spanish and Italian translations finished, that the borrowing of English names was used to cut corners. But the different European languages using Nob's translations had one major flaw. These weren't direct Japanese translations. Everything was coming from English. And when polysemy entered the picture, the coexistence of words with many possible meanings, such as in English with bat, right, or spring, translations got even more difficult. One of the funniest ones I read about was the move Slam. The move is described as follows. Slams the foe with the tail, vine, etc. Easy enough to imagine. But when being translated in Gen 1, there was no attached description. So when the Spanish translators pulled up the move list spreadsheet and saw Slam, they translated it as portazo, as in the sound of a door slamming. I'm just imagining the move and how off-putting that must have been to read. Clearly, both translation and localization were an afterthought, especially in non-English speaking territories. And for how global of a series Pokemon was by the DS era, that needed to change. Starting with Pokemon Black and White, the Pokemon Company International started handling all aspects of translation and localization instead of Nintendo. One major fix they did was to finally cut the Japanese to English to European pipeline. Now, games would just be translated from Japanese into French, Spanish, etc. Heck, even translation errors got updated, with portazo getting the correct context of atizar. The European localization process was so revitalized that Black and White was actually released 2 days before the North American release, a series first. Additionally, the release gap between Japanese and other language releases began to close. Black 2 and White 2 was a mere 4 months. Who would have thought that direct translation would have sped up the whole process, and maybe even closed the gap completely? For many years, it was a work in progress at Pokemon to accomplish a worldwide release. Many in the company didn't think it was remotely possible. Masuda even admitted that the script was the toughest hurdle to get over. To make up for the text issues Game Freak had, the Pokemon Company in London built up the translation team massively. This new special team tackled French, Italian, German, and Spanish with direct Japanese translation. The middleman of English was finally cut, never to be returned to. With all their side ducks in a row, a global release was on the horizon. But could the game's titles also symbolize this achievement? Well, X and Y are recognizable globally. Even if the way we pronounce X and Y is different, you can read it and know it instantly. What could be more fitting titles for their first global release? I'm getting ahead of myself, but I imagine ZA had a similar naming process to this. Rising the ranks of a tournament set to the letters of the Latin alphabet, the most well-known and used alphabet, again, easy for an international audience to digest. That, and let's be real, everybody expected a third version of X and Y to be Z back in the day, because, 3D design. Zygarde. Zed. But with all that history and trivia said and done, did Masuda's desire to have Kiseki's theme break through the language barrier come about? I'd argue yes, and it's because of how wonderful a job each localization team did. If you take the direct English translations of Kiseki from Japanese, you'll notice elements that embrace the themes that I've mentioned earlier. Come together with your companions and give thanks, and build a new era together. If you search for the point where the axis aligns, a world of dreams will be born. Let's build a future where everyone is thankful. Similar messages are apparent in the English version, but one major inclusion Masuda wrote in the original is missing. Throughout all time and space, a miraculous encounter occurs within a mere 100 years. The accumulating encounters of 100 years give birth to miracles. The phrasing of 100 years is striking. It's so specific. In interviews, Masuda notes that humans live for 100 or so years, and it's a miracle we get to meet during that time. That's all I could find from him, but Japan does have a public holiday called Keiro no Hi, Respect for the Aged Day. It honors the wisdom and experience of elders. Coming from the nation with the most citizens aged 100 or more, perhaps that's why the number was so prevalent to Masuda. And there are even more little changes from language to language that I need to cover because I find it so fascinating. Firstly, the German version is the only other one to use the 100-year wording. So perhaps German is the most direct translation of what Masuda envisioned. But the most fascinating part of the German version has to do with specific German words. Let us seek what unites us, the F and D in friend and foe. In German, friend and foe are Freund und Feind. Both words begin with F and end with D. And this cute concept of finding the uniting factor in the letters of these words is something that could never work in English. In the French version, several lines create symbolic comparisons of change to the changing of the seasons, specifically winter and spring. A world where heat, nourished by gratitude, will make us all forget the harshest of winters. A future is sleeping, the miracle of spring. No other language uses season metaphors like this. There's imaginative wording in Korean that creates the most robust imagery. The moment of our encounter becomes a blinding gift. It makes the dark night sky shimmer brightly. Not much to note, I just really like it. Here, the most standout thing was the strong use of ellipses. I'm sure someone who knows Italian poetry better than I can make something captivating out of this. Over the course of this life of mine, I encounter yours. It is already a miracle. The most noteworthy portion of both the Spanish and English translations is not what is found in them, but rather what is omitted. And that would be the word miracle. In all 5 other languages, the word miracle is wiggled into the song in some shape, but not for these two. On the surface, this really feels like a failing since the song's title is Miracle. But I do appreciate that the translators could still convey Masuda's message without needing to use the word. Lastly, one overall point of interest is that all 7 translations utilize plant blossoming metaphors. There's a fragile bud of hope blooming in each of our hearts. Let it grow, let it live. Let us see what it will bring. Don't fight over tiny buds. Gently support the blooming flowers. By giving the flowers, our hearts become one. Thus, let us allow the flowers of kindness to blossom. When the blossoms then wake, watch them delicately. And diversity will cross paths from which unity will blossom. For our small seed of dreams that we share, remove selfishness and try growing it pure. Let's tend the blooming flowers of our future together. If we take care of a flower, putting our heart into it, it will soon bloom and give fruit if there's no envy or fear. Share with everyone else the fruit of our flower. Pokemon has always had a strong symbolization of growth and change with flowers. From a tease made a decade ago, and so many character names, to plenty of moves and new plant-based Pokemon, to the final boss of ZA and a certain special Floette. Flowers have been an unseen emblem of the series. It makes me glad that all versions of Kiseki note this in relation to forging a better world. Very green, very Pokemon. But I think Kiseki also means a lot to Masuda personally. After all, no one was certain Pokemon would be a success in the first place, let alone a global phenomenon. And Masuda was along for the ride since the start. Following X and Y's release, there was a special music event called Pokémon Symphonic Evolutions. This traveling concert series went around the globe, playing orchestrated arrangements of Pokemon video game music from Gen 1 to Gen 6. Interestingly, there were 2 encore songs that the audience was encouraged to sing along to, which sometimes had a lead vocalist depending on the venue. One of these songs was the English Pokemon anime theme song that we all know and love. The other was Kiseki. On August 15th, 2014, the day of the concert's premiere at the Warner Theater in Washington, D.C., Masuda came on stage and conducted an orchestra for the first time in his life. This was also the first time Kiseki was ever heard with proper vocals accompanying it. Masuda's theme was now truly a song. After its first 3D game, Pokemon continued to blossom. Pokemon Go took the world by storm, and the TCG became bigger than ever before. Sun and Moon, Sword and Shield, the Legends sub-series, Scarlet and Violet, the video game series just kept growing. All the while, Masuda's role became a more decentralized one. He stopped directing. He took on the producer role, starting with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. And in June 2022, he left Game Freak. He migrated over to the Pokemon Company as its chief creative fellow, now tasked with finding new ways to bring Pokemon play to life. Now let's get back to the game in the title of this video. ZA does feature Masuda in the staff credits, but only as a special thanks. This is the smallest, most vague credit in Masuda's tenure. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely indicates a new guard in charge at Game Freak. And if his time directly working on the games is done, how fitting is it that the theme that plays during ZA's credits is the one whose message Masuda wrote himself? A message dedicated to embracing the world at large, the differences in our languages, cultures, environments, and mindsets, all whilst finding common ground. Pokemon has managed to break through these barriers and shows no sign of stopping anytime soon. Legends ZA is a good example of this. The creative direction has so much heart, and a lot of it overlaps with Kiseki's central themes. In the story, you make new friends in an unknown city, find rivals and fellow trainers from across very different backgrounds, and manage to use all your might with Mega Evolution to quell a blooming evil. From a localization standpoint, since X and Y, simplified and traditional Chinese have been added, and ZA was the first to use Latin American Spanish. Who knows which languages will be added next? If any of this has resonated with you, I highly recommend going back into the games and rewatching the credits. In ZA, they're literally hidden in the game. You need to seek out this girl in the schoolyard and talk to her to see them replay, which, this is hilarious. Or if you replay X and Ys, take extra time to appreciate the lyrics, especially when all the languages come together as one. Hopefully more people are able to appreciate this weird little song that's been forgotten about in the Pokemon community. I hope to hear that it means a lot to others out there, and that we can appreciate the thankless jobs of the translation and localization teams, as well as the legacy Masuda left behind on Pokemon. It's a miracle to exist at a time where we can appreciate so many different aspects of Pokemon, manage to care for one another, and make the world a better place. What's more to say?
In our brief lives, we've managed to meet, treasure this gift, this precious time that we have